From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. This week, Uruguay hosted an international summit on the political situation in Venezuela. Two meetings were held, one by the Montevideo Mechanism, comprising Mexico, Uruguay, Bolivia, and CARICOM. This group agreed on a declaration calling for dialogue and non-intervention in Venezuela. The other group, known as the International Contact Group and backed by the European Union, held its own meeting and called for snap elections in Venezuela and for the government to allow humanitarian aid to enter the country. Our correspondent in Montevideo, Madeleine Garcia, brings us more.
The European Union leads the International Contact Group, which is made up of 11 countries. The president of Uruguay led their meeting on Thursday, making clear that all proposals must be made under the basis of international law and of non-interference, believing that what's happening in Venezuela today can happen to any nation in the world.
The biggest dilemma Venezuela currently has is between peace and war. That's why we call for serenity with all involved and caution the international community about their actions.
Even when the goal of the International Contact Group was not to impose solutions to Venezuelans, like Federica Mogherini initially said, in the same speech, she went back on her words.
The goal is not to have a direct negotiation, but to join a democratic solution through free and transparent snap elections.
Snap elections and humanitarian aid were the main points of the final document, which came to be after a 5-hour-long meeting. Bolivia, Mexico, and the 14 countries from CARICOM didn't sign precisely because they refused to interfere in Venezuela's internal affairs.
Mexico can't support political interference in other countries. We support dialogue between the parties involved in order to find a peaceful and democratic way to put an end to this situation, without the use of force.
These elections are not part of Venezuela's constitution, and their proposal is in line with attempts at interference, which Uruguay tried to resolve right away.
The solution to the Venezuela situation can be fixed, as long as there can be talk of elections. We are not placing the limits, dates, or preconditions. I think this is an issue of Venezuela, and there is a line between interference and cooperation. We want to cooperate. If Venezuelans want elections, they have to be carried out. If they want to find out another way without elections, then they shouldn't be carried out.
Bolivia proposed that instead of humanitarian aid, economic sanctions could be lifted, ending the economic blockade by the US and the European Union.
There's a difficult economic situation, but we have to acknowledge that the economic crisis is getting worse because of the economic blockade that other countries have started. And since humanitarian aid is being offered, they should also lift the economic blockade that Venezuela is suffering under.
As the meeting was underway, several Uruguayan social organizations raised their voices on rejection to the ongoing group. Both the Montevideo Mechanism and the International Contact Group concur on rejecting military actions in Venezuela, even when there are differences in the subject of elections. They also concur that dialogue is the solution to solve the situation.
During an international press conference, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro praised Mexico and Uruguay for signing a document with CARICOM member states to promote dialogue in the country. He also pointed out that millions of Venezuelans have signed his petition calling for peaceful dialogue, which will be sent to the White House.
I have hailed this initiative and I have ratified that we are available and we are immediately ready to support any actions that support diplomacy, dialogue, common understanding among Venezuelans. Yesterday, I spent the afternoon collecting signatures, and in under 24 hours, 2 million Venezuelans have signed the letter of peace that will be sent to the White House via popular march at the United States.
Maduro also accused the opposition of trampling on the Constitution.
The Constitution of the Republic with a transition law. It is truly unbelievable how they just walk over Article 233 that they themselves call upon. This article forces them to call upon elections within 30 days. Elections for president, and to execute them in 30 days. It is taxative. You can read it. I'm sure you can read it. Surely you've seen it a couple times. If this clown show of an alternative president was valid, then they should have called on elections already. The way I did in 2013 when I was the president in charge. I was the president in charge in 2013. And the first thing I did was call upon elections. It was my constitutional obligation.
Finally, the president spoke about the so-called humanitarian aid that the United States is trying to send to Venezuela. He says if Washington really wants to help the Venezuelan people, they would lift economic sanctions imposed on the country.
We have to see beyond, from the character, this caricature that they want to show. They want to show the caricature of a country in a humanitarian crisis. They want to show the caricature of a dictatorship, and they want to make this narrative of the United States extending their hand to help people in need. That's the script. But the truth is that we have a country that is fighting, that is working, and that is fulfilling its own needs. We have a legitimate government. They're backed up by popular election and an insistent, thriving democracy. And the truth is that it is no help to us. It is a message in order to plan to humiliate us. If they wanted to help us, they should stop all economic sanctions and financial persecution. They should stop with the sanctions, which takes around $10 billion from us. Just financially speaking, numbers we would have to compare $20 million versus $10 billion. With those $10 billion, I can guarantee that we could fully supply anything that the people of Venezuela might need without begging for anyone.
For some time now, the opposition in Venezuela has been constantly talking about humanitarian aid for the nation. On February 2nd, a spokesperson announced the aid's arrival.
Next Tuesday, aid will arrive to the Colombian city of Cúcuta. We expect more aid to arrive at the border with Brazil. We are seeing a lot of goodwill from nations that want to help with the humanitarian crisis we are living in Venezuela.
But neither the Red Cross nor the United Nations were willing to sponsor this aid, which appears to be an endorsement that President Nicolas Maduro is legitimate.
To provide humanitarian aid, you have to work directly with the Red Cross. No one from the opposition, not even Juan Guaidó, made a formal request for this aid. The only person who did so was Mike Pompeo in the United States. On top of this, according to international law, to request humanitarian aid, the receiving party must give permission. In this case, the government of Venezuela.
History dictates that U.S. interventions in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, and many other countries have been catastrophic with the wholesale destruction of a nation-state. The Venezuelan government has always maintained that there are economic hardships largely imposed by U.S. sanctions, but denies a humanitarian crisis.
This humanitarian aid is a wartime strategy that is added to the ongoing attacks by the U.S. government, which wants to bring the country to its knees. They want to come here and take control of the country, dividing it up, like in Iraq and Libya, and just like they tried to do in Syria, but failed.
In comparison to other countries, Venezuela has one of the lowest foreign debts in the world.
If we take a look at what's happening internationally with the theft of Venezuelan funds and resources by the US and the UK, they are going to use our money to pay off their own debts. This is the same strategy they use in Libya.
Venezuela has asked the US to unfreeze its accounts. Currently, $23 billion are frozen, according to the Venezuelan foreign minister when he spoke at the UN.
This so-called aid they want to give us amounts to nothing but spare change. We don't need their pity. We have our own money. We have money to pay our debts. By blockading us, they want to be in control of how we can buy the things we need.
The government of President Nicolas Maduro still insists on a dialogue and an open debate to reveal what has really caused the economic crisis. Venezuela remains a country under siege by US and EU sanctions.
The president of Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly led a mass demonstration on Friday demanding peace for Venezuela. Hundreds of people took to the streets in the state of Nueva Esparta in support of the government of President Nicolás Maduro. They also demanded respect for Venezuela's sovereignty. In the march, Diosdado Cabello highlighted that all Venezuela wants is peace and that any attack by the United States is an attack against the Venezuelan people. Earlier, we spoke with Camilo Mejia, who is in Miami, Florida, for more on mobilizations within the U.S. against the government's interference in Venezuela.
I think it's the same thing. I would go even farther and say that a lot of the U.S. regime change operations in the Middle East also look pretty much the same. The format is very much the same. They take real social issues, whether they have created them or it's been a combination of real issues that the United States has exacerbated. They use that to throw people into the streets to protest, and they have people ready to shoot them, create confusion and chaos, blame the government, use that to isolate it, and then start building a case for invasion, which is what we're seeing in Venezuela. What happened in the Middle East when the United States wanted to go there for their oil and geopolitical strategic power. And it's destroyed. Every time the United States gets involved somewhere, the country's destroyed, and we don't want to see the same thing in Venezuela. We certainly don't want to see the same thing happen in Latin America.
The South African government's support for the Venezuelan government is backed by non-governmental organizations in the country. They took to the U.S. consulate in Johannesburg to protest against the attempted power grab in Venezuela. Our correspondent Matuva Malachie went to meet protesters to bring us the details.
Forward with Nicolas Maduro, forward! Forward to the defense of the Bolivarian Revolution, forward!
In solidarity with Venezuela, members of the South African Communist Party, Labour Union Formation and other social movements took time off work to express their support for President Nicolas Maduro.
Since the victory of the Bolivarian Revolution, United States has always been involved in destabilizing Venezuela. They have destabilized Venezuela through various means. It is clear to us that the USA government wants to effect a regime change in Venezuela. This is very silly and evil, comrades. President Nicolas Maduro won the 2018 elections with a landslide victory.
The U.S. mission in South Africa said it would not comment on the pickets outside their Johannesburg and Cape Town consulates, but the message against U.S. President Donald Trump's intentions on Venezuela are clear.
There is nothing ambiguous about Trump. He's a right-wing imperial agent, and he goes all out to show it. To the people of Venezuela, we say solidarity from Gaza to Caracas. Amandla.
Speaker after speaker denounced Venezuela's opposition Juan Guaido for proclaiming himself interim president. He's been described here as a disposable tool for the U.S. and its allies. The protesters say the Trump administration needs to be stopped from doing what the United States has done in Libya, Iraq and Afghanistan. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur, Johannesburg.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. An operation by Brazilian military police in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro has left at least 13 people dead. 14 others sustained gunshot injuries in the operation that took place close to the Santa Teresa neighborhood. According to local reports, two drug trafficking gangs had been fighting since Wednesday for control over the favelas, leading to police intervention. Authorities in Brazil have evacuated hundreds of people living near two dams. This comes just 2 weeks after a dam breach killed at least 300. Police living around the ArcelorMittal dam and another Vale dam were asked to move to safety on Friday. Firefighters said residents have been evacuated due to unspecified risks. 10 people are dead following a fire at the training center of Rio de Janeiro's football club Flamengo. Among the dead are members of the club's youth side, and at least 3 youths were also injured in the blaze. One of is in serious conditions. The state-of-the-art training center Nino do Urubu was recently expanded and opened only 2 months ago. It is unclear what caused the fire. Thousands of Haitians have taken to the streets to protest against corruption and the country's economic situation. Demonstrators marched in capital Port-au-Prince, blocking streets and lighting tires. They're demanding the resignation of President Jovenel Moïse. At least 10 people have died in recent demonstrations in Haiti.
The people can't take it any longer. We have spoken to the president, but he doesn't understand. There's inflation. The price of the dollar is going up. We can't stay in this situation. We have decided to see it through to the end. There will surely be a revolution in the country.
The Jamaican Minister of Transport has warned against the large number of illegal operators in the public transportation sector. Montague says this year he's devoting his full attention to the so-called robot operators. He's made it his mission to make business so expensive that it becomes illegal. Out of the 44,000 operators on routes across the island daily, 30,000 are licensed. As their country heads to the polls, Nigerian youths are complaining about lack of representation in the electoral process. While Nigerians below the age of 35 make up over of the country's 80 million registered voters, all but one of the 71 presidential candidates are over 35. Popular musician Banky W is trying to change this situation by running for a seat in the country's Congress. He hopes his decision to run for a political office will inspire other youths to join politics.
Younger generation in Nigeria, we're not doing anything. We're talking, but we're not doing anything. And I feel like what we're trying to do is inspire our generation to care again, to pay attention again, to participate, to be involved, to play our role in changing the narrative, in fixing Nigeria.
I really kind of love him. He's a nice person. I love his music. And the way he's going for this, he's going to win. And I support him. 3
miners have died in Zambia after underground mining equipment caught on fire. A spokesperson for the mine owned by Swiss giant Glencore said the incident occurred during a refueling exercise. He said operations at the mine have been suspended. Mine accidents are common in Zambia due to failures by companies to comply with safety standards. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has delivered his final State of the Nation address before the country goes to the polls in May. The economy was the primary focus of his speech. Our special contributor in Cape Town, Ayesha Ismail, brings us more.
For the country to succeed and for all to benefit, President Cyril Ramaphosa identified 5 urgent tasks.
Firstly, we must accelerate inclusive growth and job creation. Secondly, our history demands that we should improve the education system and develop the skills that we need on how we move into the future. Thirdly, we are duty-bound to improve the conditions of the life of South Africans, especially poor South Africans in our country.
He added that his government was already stepping up the fight against corruption and state capture. He said they were also working on fast-tracking the land reform process, which included expropriation without compensation. The president's speech received mixed reactions.
What limits the president is the fact that he has a party that is corrupt. What limits the president is that he's going to run out of money. And what's more crucial is that the biggest game changer this year is the 8th of May when we remove this government.
We welcome the State of the Nation address by the president. It gives hope to all of us as South Africans, in particular as trade union movement, because He focused on the economy, and he spoke about an inclusive economy.
The State of the Nation address was quite precise in addressing the critical challenge facing South Africa, the challenge of jobs and economy that is not growing, the rate of unemployment and deepening poverty, and he has put forward concrete plans to turn around that situation.
South Africans will go to the polls on May the 8th this year. Aisha Ismail, Telesu, Cape Town.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 2 Palestinian teenagers have been killed by Israeli forces at the Gaza Strip. Another 17 Palestinians were shot and wounded. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have been protesting for nearly a year, calling on Israel to end its blockade. And now it's time to bring you more stories from around the world.
Russia's investigative committee has opened a criminal investigation into a reported whale prison at Nakhodka Bay. According to local reports, 90 beluga whales and 11 orcas are being kept in inadequate conditions, amounting to abuse. Authorities plan to release the mammals. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has said the Yellow Vest protests in France have exposed the hypocrisy of the Western nations on human rights issues, adding that abuses against protesters demonstrate that they cannot be trusted.
Protesters on the streets of Paris are attacked, to the point that some have lost their eyes. Protesters in Paris are attacked by the French government's armed forces. This is the way they behave towards their people. Then they brazenly demand that we observe human rights. Do they even know what human rights are? Neither today, nor in the past, and never throughout their history have they recognized what human rights are.
Palestinian farmers and activists have been attacked with tear gas and stun grenades by Israeli soldiers. The Palestinians were planting trees in Beit Fajar at the time. Several people were rushed to hospital.
And before we end this show, make sure you tune in every Sunday for a new original documentary series by Telesur called After War. The series recounts the impact that United States interventions have had in at least 12 countries across the world.
No, the war is not finished, absolutely not.
And they can try this hook and they cancel it.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.